Normandy, June 1944. The roads were rivers of blood and mud. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of Army Group B, stood beside a burning Panzer IV. The stench of diesel and death filled his nostrils. He had once been Hitler's most brilliant general, the Desert Fox of North Africa. Now at 52, he watched his army disintegrate under Allied bombs. The invasion had come on June 6th. Rommel had predicted it. He had begged for more panzers, for air support, for anything to stop the landings. Hitler had refused. The Führer believed the Normandy landings were a feint, that the real invasion would come at Calais. Rommel knew otherwise. He drove the front lines daily, past columns of shattered German vehicles, past the bodies of 17-year-old soldiers who had been fed into a meat grinder. On June 10th, Rommel wrote a letter to his wife, Lucy. "The fighting is terrible. The enemy air superiority is overwhelming. Our losses are unspeakable." The letter was one of many. Rommel had stopped believing in victory weeks ago. The question that now consumed him was not how to win, but how to end the slaughter. He decided to confront Hitler directly. On June 17th, Rommel drove to Marshal, France, where Hitler had established a forward headquarters. The journey took hours. Allied fighter bombers strafed every road. Rommel's staff car hugged the tree lines, stopping whenever aircraft appeared. He arrived late, exhausted, and angry. The conference lasted 2 hours. Rommel sat at a table across from the Führer. He described the situation in Normandy without filter. The panzer divisions were shattered. The infantry was collapsing. The Luftwaffe had vanished from the sky. He told Hitler, "The war cannot be won militarily. You must negotiate peace." Hitler's face hardened. He lectured Rommel about new weapons, the V-1 rockets, the jet fighters that would turn the tide. Rommel interrupted. "These weapons will not arrive in time. The enemy is already on our soil." The room fell silent. Hitler did not answer. He changed the subject. The conference ended. Rommel returned to his headquarters with nothing. He later told his chief of staff, General Hans Speidel, "The Führer has lost touch with reality. He lives in a dream world." That evening, Rommel made a decision that would cost him his life. He agreed to support a coup. The conspiracy had been forming for months, led by civilian resistors and disillusioned officers. Rommel had known about it. He had hesitated. Now he crossed the line. He told Speidel, "I will stand with those who act, but I will not assassinate him. He must be arrested and tried." The distinction would matter. In the eyes of the Nazi regime, it made no difference. Rommel had betrayed his oath. The next day, he returned to Normandy. The roads were still choked with wreckage. He passed a column of retreating soldiers, boys, many of them, without helmets, without rifles. He stopped his car. He watched them shuffle past. One of them, a 17-year-old private named Helmut Wenzel, later wrote in his diary, "The field marshal stood there. He did not salute. He just looked at us. His eyes were empty." Rommel climbed back into his car. He drove toward the front. He had told Hitler the truth, and Hitler had refused to listen. Now he had joined the conspiracy. There was no going back. The summer of 1944 burned across Normandy like a furnace. Rommel's headquarters at La Roche-Guyon became a gathering place for the disillusioned. His chief of staff, General Hans Speidel, was already deep in the conspiracy. Speidel had connections to civilian resistance leaders, to officers in Berlin, to men who had decided that Hitler must die. Rommel met with them in secret. The conversations were quiet, held in gardens or moving cars where Gestapo microphones could not reach. Karl Goerdeler, the former mayor of Leipzig and a central figure in the resistance, laid out the plan. Remove Hitler, negotiate peace with the Allies, save what remained of Germany. Goerdeler wanted Rommel as a public face of the new government, a hero the German people would follow. Rommel listened. He asked questions about timing, about military logistics, about the Western Allies' willingness to negotiate. But one question he did not ask: would the plan require assassination? He already knew the answer. The conspirators wanted Hitler dead. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, the man who would plant the bomb, believed that only Hitler's death would break the Nazi regime's grip on the army. Rommel disagreed. He told Speidel, "I will not be party to murder. Hitler must be arrested and brought before a court." The distinction was thin. In the eyes of the law, plotting a coup was treason, whether the Führer lived or died. Rommel knew this. His oath to Hitler, the personal vow he had sworn in 1934, bound him to obedience. Breaking that oath meant betraying everything he had stood for. But the daily reports from Normandy broke him faster than any oath. On July 10th, he wrote in his field journal, "The enemy has broken through at St. Lo. Our lines are disintegrating. The men are exhausted." That night, he walked among the wounded in a field hospital. A soldier with no legs reached out to him. Rommel took his hand. He said nothing. What was there to say? On July 15th, Rommel sat alone in his office. He picked up a pen and began writing to his wife, Lucy. The letter was different from his usual reports. It was raw, unguarded, filled with words he could not speak aloud. He wrote, "Terrible decisions lie ahead. I cannot explain more. But you know my heart." He paused. Then he set the pen down. The letter was never sent. Why did he stop? Survivors of his staff later speculated that he feared the letter would be intercepted, that his words would condemn Lucy and their son Manfred. But perhaps there was another reason. Perhaps he could not commit to paper what he had not yet fully committed to action. The next day, July 16th, Rommel attended a briefing at the front. An Allied fighter bomber appeared without warning. The pilot saw the staff cars and dove. The bullet struck Rommel's vehicle, shattering the windshield. The driver swerved. Rommel was thrown against the dashboard, his skull fractured. He was evacuated to a field hospital, then to his home in Herrlingen. The wound saved his life for a moment. It also removed him from the conspiracy. In the weeks that followed, as Stauffenberg prepared the bomb, Rommel lay in bed, drifting in and out of consciousness. He could not direct the coup. He could only wait. His staff later testified that Rommel believed the bomb would succeed. He told Speidel, "If the attempt fails, we are all dead." He was right, and he was already too weak to run. July 20th, 1944, the Wolf's Lair, 12:42 in the afternoon. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg placed a briefcase under the oak conference table. The bomb inside was primed. He left the room. At 12:44 in the afternoon, the explosion tore through the barracks. 3 officers died. 20 were wounded, but the briefcase had been moved, shoved behind a heavy table leg by an unsuspecting officer. The blast deflected away from Adolf Hitler. In Herrlingen, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel lay in his sickbed. His skull was still healing from the July 16th strafing. His wife, Lucy, sat beside him, reading aloud from a novel. The radio played softly in the background. Then the music stopped. The announcer's voice changed. "An attempt on the Führer's life has been made. He is unharmed." Rommel sat up. His face went pale. He looked at Lucy. She later wrote, "I saw terror in his eyes, not for himself, for what would come." For several hours, Rommel believed the bomb had succeeded. The initial reports were confused. Some radio stations reported Hitler dead. Rommel told his son Manfred, who was home on leave, "The Führer is dead, the war will end." But the hope lasted only until evening. At 6 in the evening, Hitler spoke on the radio. His voice was hoarse but alive. He promised vengeance. The Gestapo moved within hours. Stauffenberg was shot that night in Berlin. Hundreds of officers, civilians, and anyone connected to the conspiracy were arrested. Torture began immediately. Confessions were extracted. Names were named. Rommel knew his name would come up. He had met with Goerdeler. He had spoken with Speidel. He had agreed to support the coup. His only hope was that the conspirators would die before revealing his involvement. On July 21st, Rommel summoned his chief of staff, General Hans Speidel, to his bedside. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn. Rommel's voice was a whisper. "Burn everything, every letter, every note, every document that links me to this." Speidel obeyed. He built a fire in the garden. The papers curled and blackened. The smoke rose into the gray sky. But the smoke was not enough. The Gestapo already had other evidence. One of the arrested conspirators, General Heinrich von Stülpnagel, attempted suicide but survived. Under interrogation, he mentioned Rommel's name. Other officers followed. The circle closed. On July 23rd, Rommel wrote a final field report to Hitler's headquarters. The report described the military situation in Normandy, hopeless, as always. But at the bottom, Rommel added a personal note: "I remain your loyal field marshal." He signed it. He did not believe the words, but he hoped they would protect his family. The report was filed. The Gestapo continued its work. Rommel waited. He could not flee. His leg wound made walking impossible. He could not fight. He had no troops, no weapons, no plan. He could only wait for the knock on the door. The days stretched into weeks. Every morning he listened for footsteps. Every evening he exhaled when no one came. But the suspense was its own torture. He told his wife, "They will come. It is only a matter of time." On August 8th, the Nazis executed Rommel's predecessor as Army Group B commander, Field Marshal Günther von Kluge. Von Kluge had been connected to the plot, distantly, indirectly. He took cyanide in a field near Verdun. His suicide note blamed Hitler. Rommel heard the news. He knew his turn was coming. October 14th, 1944, Herrlingen. The autumn leaves had turned brown and fallen. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel sat in his study, dressed in his uniform. He had known this day would come. He had been waiting for it since July. At 10 in the morning, his son Manfred, now 19, saw a green car approaching the house. Two generals stepped out. Wilhelm Burgdorf, Hitler's adjutant, a heavyset man with a brutal reputation, and Ernst Meisel, a staff officer. They wore their dress uniforms. They carried no papers, no visible weapons. Rommel met them at the door. He invited them into his study. Manfred watched from the hallway. The door closed. Inside, Burgdorf did not sit. He spoke without preamble. The Gestapo had gathered evidence of Rommel's involvement in the July 20th plot. His name had been mentioned by multiple conspirators under torture. The Führer was offering a choice. Option 1, suicide by cyanide. Rommel would receive a state funeral with full military honors. His family would be protected. His wife would receive a pension. His son would be safe. Option 2, trial before the People's Court. Rommel would be stripped of his rank, publicly humiliated, and executed. His family would be sent to a concentration camp. Rommel listened. His face did not change. He had known the terms for weeks. The only question was when the messengers would arrive. He asked for 10 minutes alone. Burgdorf nodded. Rommel walked into his wife's room. Lucy was waiting. He told her, "I have to do this. They have given me no choice." She later wrote, "He was calm. He was not afraid, but his eyes were empty." He went to his son's room. Manfred asked what was happening. Rommel said, "I have been accused of treason. The Führer offers me cyanide. I will take it." Manfred begged him to resist, to fight, to flee. Rommel shook his head. "If I resist, they will kill us all. This is the only way." He returned to the study. He told Burgdorf, "I will take the poison." The generals stepped outside. Rommel put on his leather jacket, picked up his field marshal's baton, and walked to the door. He said goodbye to Lucy. He kissed her. He turned to Manfred, "Take care of your mother." Then he walked out. The green car waited. Rommel climbed into the back seat. Burgdorf sat beside him. Maisel took the front. The car drove into the forest. Minutes later, the car stopped. The driver, a Gestapo officer, got out. Burgdorf handed Rommel a capsule. Rommel took it. He bit down. The cyanide worked quickly. He was dead within seconds. The car drove to a hospital in Ulm. Rommel's body was laid on a bed. The doctors were told he had suffered a heart attack. The official announcement went out that afternoon. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, had died of his wounds. The Nazi regime gave him a hero's funeral. The lie protected his family. But the two generals at the door had done their work. Rommel was gone, and the Third Reich had killed its most brilliant soldier. October 18th, 1944. Ulm. The city hall was draped in black. A swastika flag covered the coffin. Thousands of German citizens lined the streets, their arms raised in salute. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the senior officer of the Wehrmacht, stepped to the podium. His voice echoed through the square. Rommel died of his wounds. He remained loyal to the Führer until the end. The lie was perfect. The Nazi regime needed Rommel's legend. The German people needed a hero to mourn, not a traitor to despise. Von Rundstedt knew the truth. He had known about the plot, but he delivered the eulogy anyway. In the front row stood the men who had forced the cyanide into Rommel's hand, General Wilhelm Burgdorf and General Ernst Meisel. They saluted the coffin. No one stopped them. The funeral was broadcast across Germany. In Herrlingen, Lucy Rommel listened to the radio. She did not cry. She later wrote, "They killed him, and then they praised him. I have never hated anyone as I hated them in that moment." The war continued for 7 more months. Millions more died. But Rommel's death marked a turning point, not on the battlefield, but in the German soul. One of their greatest heroes had been murdered by the regime he served. After the war, the truth emerged. The Nuremberg trials uncovered documents linking Rommel to the conspiracy. His chief of staff, General Hans Speidel, survived and testified. Rommel's role became public. He was not a traitor. He was a man who had finally seen the monster. The final proof lies in a letter Rommel wrote to his wife in the summer of 1944. He never mailed it. The handwriting is shaky, the words raw. He wrote, "I can no longer close my eyes to what is happening, the atrocities, the lies, the senseless deaths. I must act. Whatever happens, know that I did it for Germany." He closed his eyes forever on October 14th, 1944. The cyanide took him in seconds. His last words, spoken to the driver as the car pulled away, were simple: "Tell them I loved Germany." The ledger of Rommel's betrayal is not written in battles won or lost. It is written in the diary of a young soldier who saw him standing on a Norman road, empty-eyed. It is written in the letter he never sent. It is written in the silence of his widow, who knew the truth and could not speak it. Why did Hitler's most brilliant general finally betray the Third Reich? Because he saw what Hitler had become. Because he could no longer serve a madman. Because loyalty to a nation is not the same as loyalty to its leader. Rommel chose death over dishonor. He chose suicide over a show trial. He chose his family's safety over his own legacy. And when the swastika flag was lifted from his coffin, the men who killed him stood in the front row, saluting the man they had murdered. The desert fox was gone. But his betrayal was not a crime. It was the last honorable act of a brilliant soldier who finally understood. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more untold history of World War II.